I'm here with Jon Grant, candidate for position 8, Seattle City Council. Thanks for being here, Jon.
Thanks for having me.
So this is our first year at Working Washington doing full candidate endorsements, and because we are a workers organization, today you'll be applying for a job with the workers of the city of Seattle. We'll be rating you on 3 categories: issues, your background and experience, and then third are ratings from our actual membership base as well. So, you are applying for a job with us. You've probably looked at our website and done your research. Our mission is to build a powerful workers' movement that can dramatically improve wages and working conditions, change the local and national conversation about wealth, inequality, and the value of work. Since we launched in 2011, we've grown to a base of over 100,000 workers. Since 2011, we've had a bunch of major victories I think you're probably familiar with. To recap them, we've won a campaign with Amazon where they now have installed air conditioners in their warehouses and dropped out of the American Legislative Exchange Council.
Which is huge. Congratulations.
It's a big victory for the workers. We had a campaign in SeaTac, won $15 an hour, and then had the fast food strikes that led to Seattle's $15 minimum wage. Last year, won secure scheduling and worked on the statewide minimum wage and sick leave campaign. I know you were part of that as well. Paid family this year, and we're still going strong. So we're excited and proud about the work that we've done. We're excited that you're here to interview for this position. Congratulations, by the way. It's down to 2 candidates for this position. So each of the questions, you're going to get 3 minutes for a response, and we're going to get going. Imagine you're knocking on my door to campaign. How would you make the case about why you're the best choice for workers in this race?
That is a great question. So what I would say...
I did not write it.
I'm sorry?
Thank you, I didn't write it.
I'll give you credit. I think that right now what I'm hearing from folks who are working is that even though Seattle has implemented its historic $15 minimum wage, housing costs are outpacing it. And what we know is that 81% of someone's pay raise is now going towards a rent increase. So if we don't actually get our housing costs under control, we are going to continue to lose ground on these really important achievements that workers have fought for. So the reason that I think I'm the best person for position 8 is that I have a background in affordable housing. I'm the former executive director of the Tenants Union of Washington State. Before that, I worked at Solid Ground as a housing advocate there as well. And one of the big things that I want to push for is rent control. And I think that the city could actually sue the state of Washington for its ban on any kind of rent regulation in the city of Seattle. The other thing that I'm calling for is for tenants to have collective bargaining rights. What I really want to see is that when a landlord is going to you and trying to double your rent, that the city backs you up in a negotiation with the landlord to reduce the rent, not just for you, but for everyone in the building. That's a really radical proposal. It's something that while I was at the tenants union, it was kind of like a dream that we could achieve. But we know that with these historic wins like we saw for the $15 minimum wage, Seattle is capable of big things. So I think that groundwork of experience as a community organizer, as a housing advocate, that we can really do a lot for workers to make sure that they can afford to live in the neighborhoods where they have their jobs.
Well, it's interesting you talked about collective bargaining. I'm going to go a little out of order, and I know I said that you had 3 minutes, but this next question you're going to have 60 seconds for. Collective bargaining is traditionally a term used for labor unions. So labor unions, thing of the past or thing of the future?
I think it's a thing in the present and future, right? What we need to be doing is figuring out how we can give workers more power in the workplace. And Seattle has been the cutting edge of that, right? We just recently won a victory for Lyft and Uber drivers so that they can collectively bargain with those companies. And I think that if we are going to continue to transition to what they're calling the gig economy, I mean, the gig economy is really an attempt to uncouple workers from their rights. And so the city needs to be innovative, and I only have 1 minute, so I'm going to cut it short. The city needs to keep pushing for those groundbreaking policies to find new ways for workers to unionize and build worker power.
Well, it's interesting that you're going down that vein. I have a question here about sort of the tech workers in the city of Seattle. So, Amazon had a recent announcement that they're planning on opening up a second headquarters potentially outside of the city of Seattle. What are your ideas for how the city can maximize innovation, in particular around tech stuff, but maximize innovation while also protecting and expanding workers' rights?
So, I've been really proud to participate in some of the direct actions that SEIU Local 6 has been organizing for its security workers. And Amazon really has not been stepping up to the plate to make sure its workers are treated well. Like we saw when they hired SIS as their contractor and basically were conducting union busting. People don't think of Amazon in that light, but I think if Amazon is going to essentially threaten the city that they're going to leave, we need to call their bluff. Boeing did the exact same thing, and the state bent over backwards, giving billions of dollars in tax breaks. And what did they do? They left Washington State anyways. So I think that if we're going to hold Amazon accountable, that means that we need to actually push for more from them. And I think that means increasing corporate taxation so that we can build more affordable housing.
So let's transition here. Let's say you were elected a city council member, you were hired for the position. As a city council member, what do you think your most important job responsibility would be?
I think that a city council member can be there's two different types of council members. There's council members that like having the title and keeping the seat warm, and then there's council members who can treat it like a community organizing position. If I was elected to the Seattle City Council, I would treat it like a community organizer. I would be out talking to folks who are directly impacted by rent hikes or unfair conditions at the workplace, and really using it as an organizing platform to build power in the community to create systemic change. To me, what a city council member is supposed to be doing is really having their, not just their ear to the ground, but being in the community and building those relationships with the organizations who have been building power for workers and for renters, groups like Working Washington, groups like the Tenants Union that I used to be the director of. And I think that when we have this kind of grassroots power, this kind of mobilization from below, we can create huge change, systemic change, like raising the minimum wage, like fighting for rent control, like holding Amazon accountable and making sure they pay for their fair share. So to me, what a city council member is, what it can be, what it should be, is someone who's going to be a community organizer.
Great. So this is a job interview, so we've got to ask a couple of traditional job interview type questions. What do you anticipate will be your biggest challenge as a member of city council?
I think my biggest challenge is going to be the same challenge that I faced in 2015 and also the same challenge when I was the director of the Tenants Union. And the challenge is going up against big money special interest groups. When I ran in 2015, we were outspent 8-1, and the Chamber of Commerce dumped, hundreds of thousands of dollars in that race, just like we saw in this race now. As a city council member, we're going to be going up against big business interests and corporate interests and powerful developers. And I've taken a pledge not to accept any money from any developers or any corporations so that workers and tenants and community members know that I'm accountable to them. That is the biggest challenge. Can we actually not just organize from the outside, but also gain control from inside City Hall to hold those powerful interest groups accountable?
Just for the record, Working Washington is also not taking any money from corporations or developers.
Thank you for doing that.
Although I'm not saying that if someone cut us a $10 million.
Right. If the deal is good enough, yeah. Slippery slope, be careful.
All right, so you've talked a lot about housing and workers' rights and a number of sort of issues that are really, really relevant issues in the city. If you could magically pass one piece of legislation, but only one piece of legislation that would benefit workers, what would it be and why?
That's a really great question. What I would really like to see for workers and from a workers' rights perspective is stronger protections for domestic workers. Right now there are a lot of exemptions that preclude domestic workers from earning up the full minimum wage, from getting fully paid for overtime, and also for having reasonable rest breaks. So I think a domestic workers' bill of rights would be one of the first things that I would like to champion on the Seattle City Council, and I think that there's a lot that can be done around that. So I think that would be one of my first priorities, yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned domestic workers. It's actually my very next question is both candidates for mayor actually recently announced their support for a domestic workers bill of rights. Domestic workers have been organizing with a number of organizations, and including Working Washington has been organizing a number of domestic workers, in particular nannies in the city. And so in addition to a domestic workers bill of rights, what ideas do you have about how the city can ensure that these workers are actually able to build organization and maybe outside of traditional unions?
Right, exactly. So one of the things that I really learned in my time at the Tenants Union is that workers and tenants in particular need technical assistance from organizations that can provide technical experience on how to organize in your workplace, how to assert your rights and do things like that. So the city currently has a program to provide grants to labor groups or labor-affiliated groups to educate workers about their rights. And given the nature of domestic work, it is, you're not going into an office place, you're not going into a factory, right? It's disparate, it's disconnected. What I would like to see to help workers build power and build their own organizational structures is for the city to increase its funding for outreach to those kind of trusted organizations that have those relationships with those workers, and helping them build those structures and organizations so that they can have more power where they work. So I think the more funding for the Office of Labor Standards to make sure the laws get enforced, and more funding for outreach branch to those trusted organizations that can help organizations, trusted workers, trusted organizations to reach workers to build power where they work.
Second to last question here. Other than being a Seattle City Council member, what's your dream job?
Oh gosh, my dream job, was being the head of the tenants union. That was my favorite job. Is that answering the question, or?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And so I think for me, any opportunity where you get to work with people to build power, to work side by side, that builds leadership, to me, that whatever that is, whatever form that takes, that was the work of being the head of the tenants union. Like that was really like, if I could look for those types of opportunities, that is to me is the perfect job. And that is how I look at this opportunity for Seattle City Council. It's not just getting another progressive vote on the City Council. It's getting a platform to advance a real grassroots organizing channel, essentially, for workers, for tenants, for community members, so that they have a voice at City Hall, so that they are the ones that are pushing that agenda. And I think that's the kind of, whatever future job I may have, hopefully as a City Council member, that's the work that I aspire to.
Great. And this is once again an interview for a position, so is there anything else you'd like the workers of the City of Seattle to know before we make our final decision?
Yeah, I'm really excited by this election because it is the first election that we're using the Democracy Voucher Program. And over 90% of my campaign donations come from the voucher program. That means that it's publicly sourced. And that means this campaign is it's owned by the public. And I think that this is a real opportunity to get a community voice on the City Council. I have over 10 years of experience as a housing advocate, as a tenant organizer, and we are in a housing crisis. And I think we need to hold those powerful interest groups accountable, and I think I have the experience and the connections and the organizing community to really push a radical progressive agenda for workers, for tenants, and for neighborhoods. So I hope to have folks support, and if you have any other questions, you can go to electjongrant.com.
Great. Thanks so much, Jon Grant, candidate for position 8, Seattle City Council.
Great. Thank you for having me.